Hi, I'm Nino Gonzalez, and welcome to another episode of Making Sense. And today we have a repeat guest, and we were so interested in the topics you were discussing about last time. And Tommy Cano, welcome again. And let's talk about you work with a small business development center here at the college, and again, reintroduce yourself to the audience if you could, and what this important seminar that's coming up that the public and especially small business owners or any type of business owner can attend.
Sure. My name is Tommy Cano, and I'm the president owner of Cano HR Group. We've been in business now. In April, we'll hit our 5th anniversary. Right. So we are representing companies and all their HR needs, from hiring to firing, in between issues,
sure.
Dramas, harassment cases, all of that. Particularly in the hiring aspect of it, we also assist in completing and assist clients with I-9 forms.
I-9 forms.
Yes.
And the I-9 form, for those that are viewing and aren't aware of that, I think if you have a job, you had to fill one of those out. Let's give a reminder of what that I-9 is for.
Right, the I-9 is the documentation that needs to be completed that will allow the employer the opportunity to identify whether people are authorized to work in the U.S. They don't have to be citizens. They just have to have authorization to work in the United States. And regardless of whether you have U.S. citizens or not, you still need to complete this form. So when Immigration, Customs and ICE, Homeland Security, HSI, they come in and knock on your door, you need to provide those I-9s to show that you obtain the proper documentation.
And there's a time frame that it has to be complete from the time that the employee is hired, correct?
That is correct. So the day of the hire date, the day that they start, that's when Section 1 has to be completed. It can be completed before,
right,
but no later than the first day that they actually started working.
Okay.
And then from that day on, the Section 2, which is the employer section, has to be completed within 3 days, preferably.
And so Section 1, it's basically the employee fills that one out, and it's basically their basic information, correct?
That is correct. They complete it themselves. It could be translated. At the very bottom, they've actually changed that, modified that form, and should be used now. It was to be out July of 2017. So that form is the one that needs to be used at this point. And on the very bottom, it says whether or not you used a translator or preparer.
Right.
And if you didn't, it needs to be crossed out. But if it did, people can actually prepare for the employee,
right,
but they need to fill out the section right below that.
And I guess the preparer, the translator, needs to put their information, correct?
That is correct. They need to.
And so let's talk about Section 2.
Correct.
And I think Section 2, you have several documents that the employee can bring in and present to prove that they are eligible to work here in the U.S. And then I think in one section you only need one document, but in another section you need 2 documents, correct?
So there's 3 different sections. So we're talking about Section 1, which is the employer. Section 2, which is the one you're referring to, is the section that the employer has to complete. And most employers make the mistake of not completing that Section 2 because they have Section 1 completed and they ignore Section 2, or right, they complete just half of it.
But Section 2 is probably the most important because
yes,
that's where you're asking for the documents from the employee to see if they are eligible to work here in the U.S., correct?
Section 2 consists of Section A, List A, I should say, and it clearly says List A or List B and C.
Okay.
So List A will be something, for example, is a resident alien card,
right,
visa.
Passport, correct?
That's correct. Both of those, that particular document, a resident alien card, covers both identity and authorization. Authorization to work, right, correct. List B is just identity, okay, which is a driver's license, school ID, and then List C would be something like Social Security card, birth certificate. So if you notice, List B consists of photo, right, ID. List C is there's no photo on a Social Security card.
And for example, and those are just some of the most common documents that are asked for. But I've taken a look at the instructions for the I-9, and there's a whole list of other ones that are acceptable. and they even provide illustrations or pictures of
What they look
what is acceptable and what is not, and the numbers to actually enter into that
correct.
section, correct?
That is correct. So the document from list B, there's 4 lines. So you have to identify the title of the document, the issuing authority of the document number, and the expiration date.
Right.
And those lines need to be completed. And they need to be completed in the format that it requires.
Right.
So common mistakes such as the dates of employment or dates, expiration date, it's a 2-digit month, 2-digit day, and a 4-digit year. And most employers make the mistake of just putting either blank or 7717
Right.
instead of 0707.
Oh, really? It
Yes.
gets that technical?
They get,
Wow.
those are, and that's exactly what they call them. They're technicalities.
Right.
And so they're substantive violations, and then you have the technicalities.
So what's one of the reasons that an employer would not fill that bottom part out? Like you said, maybe the first section is filled out by the employee, but then they don't follow up on completing the rest of the document.
We hear from different clients of ours that they were going to do it tomorrow, and tomorrow never got there.
Right.
That they felt that, of course, it's a U.S. citizen, that they didn't complete Section 2, that the documentation that they provided, all they needed to do is just make a copy of the resident alien card or Social Security card and ID and attach it,
And not fill
that
it out.
would be sufficient.
Correct.
Just very common, mistakes and misunderstandings that are very, very costly for employers.
And let's talk about making photocopies. It's not a requirement to make a photocopy
Correct.
of the documents. It's just to enter the information, right?
That is correct.
But if I'm aware that if you do make photocopies, you should apply it consistently to everybody,
That is
because
correct.
you could be, I guess, discriminatory, correct?
That is correct. So that you hit it on the head. If you're not going to make copies for anybody, or for one person, then you don't make copies for anybody.
Right.
If you're going to make copy for one particular employee, then you have to have copies for everybody because of that discriminatory factor.
Right. How long has the I-9 been in existence? For years and years.
The I-9 actually came out November 1986, and
Okay.
I believe it was November 6th of 1986.
So it's been several years back
Absolutely.
that we've been using the I-9, and so why the importance of it now? I know it has probably a lot to do with the current administration
That is correct.
up in Washington, D.C., pushing more enforcement of this. Is that correct?
That is correct. They, as everybody probably knows by now, they hired 10,000 new agents
wow.
to Homeland Security, and of course they're pushing, to employers to be compliant. Most recently, we've heard, the raids that they've hit 7-Eleven stores,
Right.
and there were some not only penalties, but there was some arrests from top management, HR professionals within the organization. I believe there was another franchise that was hit in California as well. Just recently, I believe that one was last month.
What could lead to an arrest?
Willful wrongdoing, willfully knowing that you have undocumented, unauthorized workers,
Right.
and trying to cover either by not completing section of the N9s or completing it knowing that they're fraudulent documents.
Fraudulent documents.
That's
wow.
correct.
And that's still a big issue, right? The use of fraudulent documents.
That is correct. And of course, you have different types of, over 50 states, you're going to have the border cities, the border states, major cities that are going to be struggling with this. And anywhere else, though, again, regardless of the U.S. citizen or not, you need to make sure that those documentations are
And let's talk about, how aggressive the enforcement has been. As we were talking before the show, you were mentioning some statistics before of how many, audits or examinations they were doing compared to now. Why don't you elaborate a little bit more on that?
So before this new administration, their audits were about 10 a month, and now with the new administration, they're auditing about 100 companies a week.
100 companies a week.
100
Wow.
companies a week. So, and there's no mercy. They go in, employers need to know that they're going to go in and they're going to give you what they call an NOI, which is a notice of inspection.
Right.
And they give you 3 days. 3 days to gather the documentation,
Oh, so
And
they don't go in right away and
No.
say
Pick up.
I want to inspect the paperwork. They give you some time.
That's right. They give you 3 days, and 3 days to gather the I-9s of current employees, former employees. They look back 3 years,
Right.
and which is what they call the active employee, active folder and inactive folder of I-9s. They're going to ask you for 940s, 941s, 1099s, any contract labor employees or people that have worked for you, to confirm whether they were truly 1099 employees or they were required to be a I-9 employee.
Oh, so they also go into the classification purpose of whether it's an independent contractor or an employee?
Yes, because they want to make sure that you're not hiding employees behind the payroll, and that should be considered employees.
And is that information communicated, shared with the IRS then?
Yes.
It is. Wow.
Yeah, they probably tell you no, but everything is connected
Right.
with Social Security, with the IRS, the local states representatives, state unemployment, because they need to get their taxes too. So.
And let me ask you a question. Sometimes like when you go to a business, or especially you see it in convenience stores, you see this sticker that says E-Verify.
Correct.
What's the difference between E-Verify and having the I-9?
So the difference, it's still the same process. You still need to complete the I-9.
Right.
E-Verify is now web-based, and once you complete the I-9, you upload the E-Verify into E-Verify. And E-Verify will, to simplify it, it'll give you, it's like a street light. You're going to have a color red, which means do not hire. Yellow means that there's something in the documentation that needs to be clarified.
Right.
They may ask you to go to Social Security or to their office. They may ask for different documentation. And green obviously means you're good to go. You can continue hiring this person.
Will this E-Verify system tell you if a Social Security card is being misused? If it's been reported as maybe identity theft?
It could. I don't think it specifically tells you it's misused.
Right.
But it'll give you a
warning.
yellow, and they may ask you, I need you to come in. It may give you a mismatch that doesn't match the name of the person.
Right.
So, but it won't necessarily say fraud.
And whose responsibility is that? The employer?
That is correct.
To follow up and correct those deficiencies, correct?
All the employer has to do is just let the employee, the applicant, if he or she hasn't started, more than likely that person's already working for you.
Right.
But let that person know that they need to go to the nearest ICE office, Homeland Security office, because there's some questions, some doubts about the documentation,
Sure.
some clarity, and in my experiences, they leave and they don't come back.
Okay.
So that's already a sign. There might be some identity theft issues, and they need to go in there and clarify it, and need to show their proof. And then we get, the system is connected to their system, so then it becomes an assignment on your end, and at that point, you just got to keep track of it. And then it gives you eventually the either red light or the green light.
Oh, wow. Well, we'll come back and talk more about these I-9 issues and about the seminar that's upcoming at El Paso Community College on the next segment of Making Sense, so stay tuned. Welcome to the second half of Making Sense, and here we are talking about these I-9 issues that have become more prevalent due to the current administration in DC and in having more enforcement of these I-9s. And before we took the break, we were talking about E-Verify. Mm-hmm. And is E-Verify required by every employer?
So E-Verify, depending on the state,
Right.
in the state of Texas at the time is not required. E-Verify is only required for employers that are government contracting.
Okay.
So some of those government contracts will require you to show that these individuals are E-Verified. And see, the process on E-Verify is, I'm an employer in Texas. If I decide to go into E-Verify now, I will do E-Verify, I'll E-Verify any new hire going forward. So
you don't have to go to the past.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless the government contract says specifically, we need whatever individuals you're sending me, we're granting you the contract.
On
They're
that
gonna-
contract?
That is correct.
Okay.
If you have tenured employees that are going to go work in the contract, then those people need to be submitted to.
And I wanted to ask you, as you have clients, do you recommend them to use E-Verify even though it's not required here in the state of Texas, even if there's no federal contracts?
That is correct. I'm an employer. I mean, I am the actual entrepreneur myself. And
Right.
in order for me to be able to sleep at night, and I would do not only E-Verify, but there's something also known as image program.
Right.
So the image program, your first step is E-Verify. Image program is you're partnering up with ICE, Homeland Security, and they will come and audit you. But the process is a little bit different because you're partnering up with them. You're letting them know that in good faith you're trying to be compliant. So I would definitely recommend E-Verify to my clients.
And so, does the government offer, and I know they do, training sessions for, if you're an employer or I'm an employer and we send our employees who are going to be handling these I-9s and being responsible for filling those out, we can send them to training to be properly trained on the filling out of that document, correct?
That is correct. It's rare to see an I-9 training through actually ICE or Homeland Security. Most of these trainings are done by attorneys, other consulting firms like ourselves.
Or the Small Business Development Center?
The Small Business Development Center. So that's why we decided to partner up with ICE and Homeland Security and say, we want to ask you to come in and educate the employers, because obviously a lot of it is just ignorance, not knowing, how does it really affect me? So that's why we have this training coming up next week.
And we were talking that they give you a 3-day notice.
Correct.
How can they be sure that you did not fill out those documents within those 3 days?
I think it's just really, there's going to be error. There's going to be, just.
I guess if you're trying to do it that rushed,
Yes.
correct?
You're going to print out, common mistakes that we see when we do audits is that the employer will print out the I-9 that's online.
It has a date at the bottom.
And it has a date at the bottom. And somehow an employee that was hired in 2007
but it was just
is signing a 2017 form.
Right.
Those are common mistakes. And but I think honesty is the best way of going about it. But it's still not going to save you from a penalty.
So let's talk about this seminar. And you said that it is going to be conducted actually by ICE, correct?
Correct.
And so tell me what's going to happen at this seminar, when it is, and what the cost is.
So from experience, I've traveled throughout different states to go to these I-9 seminars. And these I-9 seminars out of town can cost north of $400. I just went one myself attended one in San Antonio in December, and it was $500.
Right.
It was by attorneys. And that's not including the flights, hotel, and all of that.
Hotel and meals and
That is
all
correct.
of that, correct?
They, here in El Paso, this particular seminar will only cost each person $25 to attend.
That's
Yes.
a steal.
That is
That
a
is
steal.
a steal.
And thanks to the SBDC.
And much better than if you're not informed, than the fines that you will be paying.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Right. And so tell me more about when it will be held, the times, and what will be covered there.
Absolutely. It'll be on Wednesday the 28th, which is next week.
Of March, right?
March the 28th. Homeland Security, ICE representatives will be here, I believe, for a couple hours. They will talk about E-Verify. They will talk about the new Form I-9, how to complete the form, common mistakes,
Right.
any question that could be answered. What happens when forms expire, re-verification, recertifications. Those are things that they will be talking about. And of course, our company is going to be there as well to answer questions and give them examples
Right.
of some of the penalties that we've made.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about, I guess, some of the horror stories you've seen,
Correct.
or with some of your clients, or that you've seen from other individuals.
I can tell you that I think the lowest that I've seen thus far is $43,000 penalty. That's after negotiation, by the way. And the highest that we have right now open is $318,774.
Wow.
Yes, and 40 cents to be exact.
And 40 cents.
To be exact. So we are, as a matter of fact, in the process of trying to negotiate that, have a hearing with Chief Counsel because that shuts down any particular
Sure.
business.
And what's creating those big penalties?
Well,
Like, is it the number of employees, the number of deficiencies they have?
right.
What is it that's creating such a big penalty?
So for that 318,000, particular employer, they've got a total of 50 employees.
Okay.
But because
And that's
it's
a
not
small
just-
business.
it's extremely small business. But remember, they look at your active employees.
Right.
When they see that your active folder, the active I-9 folder, is wrong, then they open it up to 3 years.
Back.
And in those 3 years, you can have a lot of turnover. And for every individual that comes out on your payroll for those last 3 years, you have to justify an I-9 for every single one of them. So either lack of keeping the documentation, so we'll talk about purging as well, but either they purge the document, they never completed the document, and if they completed it, it's incorrect. So it's a combination of things. And penalties can range up to $3,000 per employee.
Right.
So.
And this is sensitive information that the employers collect. Does ICE take a look at any privacy or protection of this information or not?
No. You don't want to keep your I-9s in the personnel file,
Right.
because they will have access to sensitive information that perhaps they can share with other government entities.
Right.
But, and to be quite honest with you, they don't want to go through the sorting process.
Sure.
That will upset them. So just giving them the I-9s and having an active holder would be perfect.
But also what I was meaning was the employer must also take responsibility in protecting that information,
Oh,
that it's not stolen,
That is
for
correct.
other purposes, correct?
Well, and lost more than anything.
Or hacked or
Yeah,
whatever.
yes.
Right?
Because you show up, what we do for our clients is when they get visited, we work together with our client. We put together the active folder, inactive folder, and we put them in boxes, and we tell them to put them in order, alpha order.
Right.
Try to, clean it as much as possible to make it easier for the auditor.
Right.
So we do show up with boxes, and I'm talking about only I-9s. So you can imagine if it's
Sure.
all their folder that consists of the W-4 application, you're going to show up in truckloads, and that's not going to be fun for them.
Right.
Yep.
And let's talk about, you had mentioned something about document abuse. And I guess that falls under a technicality, is that maybe you're asking for too many documents, correct?
That's correct. So when we do self-audits, that's what we call self-audits. So we go to a client and we look at their documentation. We pull out the I-9s, and it's very common to see the Section 1, Section 2 on the back end, and then a copy.
Right.
So when you see a copy of documentation, we have seen resident alien card, social security card, driver's license,
Passport, maybe.
passport, even immunization shot records.
Oh, wow.
And we specifically tell them, you cannot require them to bring you a document. You can show them the list and say, you can bring me one document from list A, or
Two
one from B,
Right.
and one from C.
Right.
Not two from B and not two from C. It specifically says that. And you see sometimes one, you see three, you see four, you see two, but you see two from C or two from B or A and B.
And I can understand that on the employer side. I think
Right.
they're trying to, cover their behinds and saying, well, if I get more documentation, I'll be safer.
Right.
But that's a penalty, correct?
That is a penalty because that's considered document abuse. And see, the way the Department of Labor, Department of Justice, ICE, Homeland Security, all these people, the way they see that is you're trying to make it difficult for the employee.
Right.
And by not bringing you the right documentation, that could be discriminatory. All they have to do is just justify again what the list requires.
And what if the employee doesn't know what type? So the employer can't tell them, you have to bring this and this.
Correct.
Can they?
They can give them examples.
But they cannot tell them,
specific.
I need your driver's license
Exactly.
and your social security
correct.
card. Just as long as it's something from each of those lists. But a lot of employees aren't aware of that.
Right.
They don't
don't
have
know
the
that.
knowledge.
That is correct. They don't know that until they perhaps don't get the job,
Right.
or deny the job, and then they go inquire. They may call ICE directly and say, am I supposed to give them? And that's what opens an investigation.
Right.
So, but most of the time they don't know. And again, the employer can actually say, we need documents from list A, B, or C. For example, either a resident alien card, and that'll be sufficient, or a driver's license and Social Security, example.
Sure.
But not say, you need to bring me the Social Security card and your driver's license.
And let's talk about what industries do you see are being hit the most? I guess, you know, they're going to target those that have the highest percentage of, I guess, people that aren't authorized to work here in the U.S., correct?
That is correct. So the top 5, you know, industries you see is hospitality entities, transportation, restaurants, janitorial services.
Right.
You know, those are the most common. Construction. You know, you see your construction workers, they're driving by, and you see these individuals working out there, and there's going to be questions. There's going to be some doubt, especially in the border cities.
You know, another probably maybe a lawn maintenance company.
Lawn.
Correct.
Landscaping. The list goes on. Landscaping. You know, manufacturing companies. You know, we hear a lot of.
Or convenience stores such as 7-Eleven that was hit hard.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, there's not one industry that's going to be off the radar. But those are the most common ones.
Wow. So you know, this is a great deal, $25. You don't have to get on a plane, rent a hotel room, and you're actually going to have officials there from ICE and Homeland Security. And of course, your expertise, you know, from dealing with different clients and hopefully scaring the audience to prepare these documents well and correctly to avoid those big penalties.
Yeah, because there's no way around that penalty. And you know, I would hate to see companies here in El Paso shut down because of not preparing that.
Yeah, and it affects, you know, everybody on so many different levels. You know, it affects the business owners' lives, the employees' lives. It affects everybody. It's better to fill out the documentation correctly. Well, thank you, Tommy. It was a pleasure having you again with this wealth of information. And I hope if you're interested, you attend that seminar on Wednesday, March the 28th, and it will be held here at the ASC in the boardroom. And the cost is only $25. And hope to see you there, and we'll see you on another episode of Making Sense. Goodbye.